He's gonna have to fight! Bang! Pressure's coming! Dumped! Hogtied! When you've given everything, what will the record books say about you, Matthew?
Happy holidays, everybody, and welcome back for Season 2, Episode 41 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Last week, we started off by trying to put out the fires in fantasy football lineups when influential players like Patrick Mahomes and Jaden Daniels went down. Then, Tarek Skubal announced he would play for Team USA in the World Baseball Classic, rounding out maybe the greatest rotation ever assembled with Paul Skeens, Logan Webb, and Joe Ryan. And we wrapped up with the WNBA's looming lockout and predicted the Thursday night football game between the Seahawks and Rams, which did not disappoint in the slightest. The Seahawks pulling off the first ever game-winning two-point conversion in OT. And this week, who am I fooling? We have to open up again with Fantasy Football Friday because I got a couple of championships to play for, and I hope you do too. Off the bat, we ought to take a brief moment of silence for Brock Bowers. Nothing terribly bad happened to him, it's just that he's on the Raiders and no one should ever have to suffer that. In all seriousness, though, I am left with a ginormous hole-in-one lineup as Bowers was put on IR on Christmas Eve. Literally the worst present ever. I gotta tell you, I would have rather gotten a fruitcake. This guy had been on the injury report most of the year after a play in Week 1, where he made a nice long catch and run, but he was tackled a little bit awkwardly and his knee banged on the turf. Mr. Most receptions ever by a rookie at any position. Mr. Destroying the tight end record books. And now I'm going to have to throw a dart at Taysom Hill or A.J. Barner or somebody. And I got to say, that was my knee-jerk reaction, but I happened to look right away at the Raiders' backup tight end, Michael Mayer, and I saw that he had his best game of the year in the one game that Brock Bowers missed. That was back in Week 6 against the Titans. He had 5 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. His quarterback for Sunday, Geno Smith, has been, in a word, bad. But he does target tight ends a fair amount, and Mayer was drafted 35th overall in 2023 for a reason. He's had very little chance to be the guy in his career, but these last 2 games are big ones. Plus, I like him even more in Week 18 against the Chiefs' defense. That team has just completely kind of given up, it seems, and they got lit up by the Titans last week. Michael Mayer is a pretty high priority add, if not for this week, then definitely for next. Personally, I think I'm actually going to go with Taysom Hill because he was the Saints' leading rusher last week too, but Mayer is probably the safer pick. DK Metcalf hurt me too, although not quite as badly as Brock Bowers, and thankfully I have those two on different lineups. The difference between those two being DK isn't injured, he's suspended. I'll link that video of him sort of shoving/swiping at a fan in the stands. Of all the receivers in the league that I would be willing to go lean over the railing to kind of jaw with, I think he would literally be the last one, probably one spot above Mike Evans. That's just, that's not worth it. But geez, Pittsburgh is already one of the more rocky receiver situations in the league, and they went from George Pickens to DK Metcalf, 2 of the all-time head cases. But their talent is generational if these guys could get their heads on straight. As a fantasy manager, continue to upgrade both the Steelers running backs, as they're one of only a couple of teams that can support 2 good ones right now. Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell are PPR RBs 17 and 18 for the year, and this is exactly the kind of scheme that their offensive coordinator Arthur Smith is known for. Everyone gets touches, and Aaron Rodgers has zero interest in stats at this point in his career. He is only out there to win. Mike Tomlin is only out there to win, and just nailed down another one of those winning seasons that he always just produces from somewhere, and no one besides these 2 running backs can be counted on for fantasy purposes, especially not in the playoffs. Thank you so much, DeKalen Zecharias Metcalf. I still like Xavier Worthy's fantasy situation with the Chiefs. I said it last week, and I'm going to double down, and yes, I know that coming into this week, he's PPR wide receiver 52. I also know that KC is down to third-string quarterback Chris Oladokun after Gardner Minshew followed Mahomes' torn ACL with a knee injury of his own on Sunday. When any team plays a third-string quarterback, you have to temper expectations for everybody fantasy-wise, and that held up on Christmas night when the Chiefs had 66 yards passing. There have been next to no expectations for Worthy for quite a while with the Chiefs' offensive and overall struggles. The matchup was soft last week against the Titans, and Worthy still didn't see higher usage, with Rashee Rice, who should be the Chiefs' number 1, put on season-ending IR. Despite it all, this is my Week 18 lottery ticket. Thankfully, I'm not in a spot where I have to play him, but the matchup he's going to have against the Raiders in Week 18 is as good as it gets. And I wish 40-yard dash speed translated better to football ability, but here's how I would think about that game. KC already has nothing to play for, they've been eliminated, and they likely won't have Mahomes for at least part of next year. They have to get Worthy a chance to show that he can either be the go-to guy in the young kind of Tyreek Hill type role, or that they have to give up on a 28th overall pick after just 2 years. He had 9 total touchdowns as a rookie on only 79 touches, so I think there's very little chance of the latter, but they must try to unlock him somehow. And the last knife driven into my heart last week came in the Browns and Bills game in the early slots. Quinshon Judkins has been one of the few bright spots in another very Cleveland Browns season for these Cleveland Browns. As of right now, Friday morning, Judkins is 1 yard behind the Raiders' Ashton Jeanty for the lead among all rookie rushers. They both have had a lot asked of them right away. Judkins handled almost 16.5 carries a game, he was relied on in pass protection, and he even went out in a blaze of glory with the hit that he fractured his leg on. Shedeur Sanders threw him a swing pass just a little bit late, and he got smacked by Matt Milano, and now fantasy managers like myself, who had both him and Brock Bowers in one lineup, are in shambles. The Browns have other options, but my much stronger recommendation is to look to another team entirely. Other rookie running backs that I happen to like. The Bears' Kyle Monangai is still a viable option if he's on waivers in your league. Like I've been saying for 3 or 4 weeks now? But that's highly unlikely at this point that you can get him. The Texans' Woody Marks might be the same way, but he is actually the starter when he's healthy, and he'll likely handle the bigger workload over Nick Chubb. And still, if you have no other options and you think the Browns are going to actually try to win against the Giants in the Tank Bowl, then you can pick up Dylan Sampson. That's Judkins' backup. I can't see him being a one-to-one replacement for that kind of volume, but he has shown to be a capable receiver. That's kind of your one hope if you're playing Sampson. That, or I suppose that they depend on him in the red zone and he gets a bunch of touches there. No promises if you don't have a better backup plan than this. No promises in general if you put any degree of faith in the Cleveland Browns. So that's all for Fantasy Football Friday this week, the penultimate week that we're going to do it for the season. That brings a tiny little tear to my eye. The more I get into fantasy, the more I study it and pay attention to what other experts are saying, and I do my own research, the better I play. And I'm not even an overly good drafter. I've just never played in a league where I wasn't the person that made the most roster moves. I try to hyper-optimize everything and play keep away and look at, what the weather is going to be and all these tiny little details that give you a hint about the outcomes. I hope to keep getting better and more nerdy and obsessive each and every year, so tag along with me. Thanks to everyone that took any of my tips up to this point in the year, unless you had a terrible fantasy season, in which case you didn't hear them from me. Best of luck in the playoffs if you're still in them, and I will update you on where I stand on my 2 championship runs next week. Next segment takes on a developing rivalry that just might end up being the best one in the NBA. It's one that could not have been imagined at the end of the season in 2023, even 24. It's the Thunder and the Spurs. Let's start this story with April of 2024. The San Antonio Spurs had just wrapped up a second straight season with exactly a 22-60 record. The good news was they had drafted the incomparable Victor Wembanyama, maybe the greatest unicorn of a prospect ever, and it still hadn't led to any improvement from the prior year. Wemby averaged over 21 points, 10 rebounds, and 3.5 blocks to win Rookie of the Year unanimously, and then there was kind of no other starting level talent on the roster. Meanwhile, the Thunder were about to become a dynasty. They won 57 games, they went to the Western Conference semis, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander finished second in MVP voting. Chet Holmgren was the second overall pick, and the rest of the roster that would go on to win 68 games the following year was put in place. OKC was loaded. And this year, it appears we're going to have to call it a rivalry. I mentioned last week that the Spurs knocked OKC out of the NBA Cup semifinal in a very entertaining 111-109 game. Wemby was making a return there after 12 games off with a calf strain. And remember, that came after he was shut down for nearly the whole second half of last year with the blood clot. The semifinal game was the second loss of the season for the Thunder, but since then, it sort of looks like the wheels have fallen off, relatively to what we've been accustomed to seeing from them. The next matchup that these two would get, just a week and a half later in San Antonio. The Spurs throttle the Thunder there for their biggest loss of the year, out of just 3 of them at that point, 130-110. They get another matchup on Christmas Day, one of the best basketball days of the year, and only 2 more days after the last drubbing. And the Spurs would further cement themselves in the conversation as, dare we say, the best team in the NBA by giving out another whooping on Christmas. They held OKC to 39% shooting to drop them to 26-5. That's still incredible, but it's nowhere near that pace where they started, the best 25-game start in NBA history. 3 losses to a team in any year is sort of a lot. That's notable, right? 3 losses in a span of 12 days for 3 of their 5 overall losses on the year is on the outer edge of believable. Because it's a conference game, if I recall correctly, you get 2 home and 2 road matchups per year, so they'll still play twice more. Somebody leave a comment and correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I know it's not a divisional game, so it sounds right. Of course, you must have more matchups than that within the division. Regardless, I shudder to imagine the narrative if San Antonio sweeps the whole season series, especially because the NBA Cup was a bonus game. Now, maybe the Thunder have just gotten the boogeyman in their heads. That's possible, but cracks were showing at other times. They lost the Friday before Christmas, the 19th, to the Timberwolves. Or maybe San Antonio's just become that good since the De'Aaron Fox trade last year at the deadline. The Spurs' balance and bench presence has been huge in the season series so far, probably the deciding factor. Wemby's only played 20, 23, and 26 minutes in those games, and the whole rest of the regular rotation has cranked up their play. Plus, when Wemby is on the floor, he's still the same post presence offensively and defensively. He's still altering shots, getting tons of boards, getting to the line, shooting free throws really well, and every other thing that we already knew he was so good at. The Thunder are probably going to continue to beat up on everybody else. They're probably still going to end the season as the best team, but OKC has lost all of their prospects of beating those 73-win Warriors for the most wins. And what's worse, they just might have found their newest rival in an unlikely place. And I'll toss in my disclaimer at the end. I'm not watching the NBA every single night. I love football too much, and football is still on. And I have been and will remain an NBA casual. I don't really have any team loyalty, even though the Pistons are my hometown team. I only really tend to root for my favorite players on any given game day. That doesn't mean I don't find it fascinating and want to learn more about the league and the sport every year. It does make me a better broadcaster. And I think we can all enjoy things more to a point when we know them better. Then, of course, you can get too far on the other side of the curve, and you can get to that point where you struggle to watch for enjoyment. And I can only recommend that you don't let yourself get to that point. Kind of rotate some things in and out if you start feeling that way. Otherwise, you run the risk of becoming a podcaster, and that is a terminal disease. And one more MLB contract to look at, given out by maybe its most maligned franchise right now. The Athletics, wherever they play nowadays, just gave out the largest contract in team history after 125 years. Tyler Soderstrom was a first-round pick in 2020 and is in year 3 with the big club. I say the big club, but when it comes to the Athletics, of course, it's more of a medium club. Anyways, Soderstrom had one of the best breakout seasons in the league this year. He just wasn't rookie eligible, so he didn't get all the recognition that his teammate Nick Kurtz did, even with some similar numbers. In his first 2 years combined, Soderstrom hit .204, had 12 home runs and 33 RBI in 106 games, splitting time between catcher, first base, and DH. In 2025, he found an everyday role by giving up catching completely, switching mostly to left field, and slugging well enough to ensure he was in the lineup every day. The numbers clearly showed that he should have been an all-star, and the contract shows that, I want to keep calling them Oakland, but the franchise formerly known as the Oakland Athletics are finally focused on player development. The full profile for Soderstrom looks like this. 24 years old, left-handed hitter, with 25 home runs, 93 RBIs, 126 OPS plus, or 26% better than league average, 11 outfield assists, second in the American League, a Gold Glove finalist, and 4.3 wins above replacement. All that makes one lean toward the verdict that 7 years, $86 million is quite an underpay. The kicker is that if he hits all of the incentives/escalators throughout the life of the deal, the max value is $131 million in that same time span. That would be almost $19 million per year. And with that detail in mind, it does sound a lot more fair. Doesn't it seem like, too, with as many good young players as they have over there, that this team really should make the postseason next year? After having all this organizational turmoil, fans clamoring for them to be sold, everybody hates the owner, they play in a minor league ballpark, lowest attendance by a mile. They really have put together a great core, and they're still ranked 22nd in payroll committed for 2026. Plus, they finished this year at just 76 and 86. Like, man, they're not that far away. If they didn't play in the same division as the Mariners and Astros, I would say they have a good chance to win their division next year. However, wildcard is probably going to be more their speed. So back to Tyler Soderstrom. This deal does have some degree of precedent to it. He's only had 1 year of real production and only 1 year as a full-time player. And yet, back to what I said at the very beginning of this segment, this is the largest contract the team has ever given out. It shows how good his physical tools are because I don't think any 1 year, no matter how transcendent, warrants that whole contract on its own, hence the escalators and the ability to earn those raises throughout the life of the deal. Do you know or remember some of the players who have previously held the title of highest paid, Oakland or whatever athletic? Billy Butler of Kansas City Royals fame got 3 years, $30 million for 2015. That held up for nearly a decade. Brent Rooker and Lawrence Butler, their other starting outfielders, got 5- and 7-year deals last offseason. And now that trio should be intact and hit a bunch of home runs together for a long time. Watch out for these guys. For Oakland or Vegas or wherever the team ends up playing next, because there is a really good young core there. So ends Season 2, Episode 41. I did not, in fact, record this on Thursday, on Christmas. As such, again, I already knew the outcomes of the Christmas Day NFL games. The Lions are officially out of the postseason picture after turning the ball over 6 times and losing to a Vikings team with 3 net passing yards. An incredible fall from 15 wins and the number 1 seed last year. The Cowboys would be a juggernaut if their defense could stop anybody, and the Chiefs gave the Broncos quite a scare, but they couldn't score in a 2-minute drill with a very depleted offense. I'll put a question in the poll on this one, asking something to the effect of, how do you like the games on Netflix, or what your favorite platform is to watch games on other than linear TV. I even found myself a little bit crossed up when the night game was on Prime and then the 2 earlier ones were on Netflix, and I kind of floundered around for a moment looking for it. And like everybody else, I was left wondering after that game, have we just seen the last of Travis Kelce in the NFL? There was no real indication from him either way, but be prepared for chatter about that this entire offseason. Thanks for coming back week after week, or if you're relatively new here, as always, we are happy to have you. Either way, check out all my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, @TheVoiceOfTanner, X, just Voice of Tanner, YouTube, the whole thing spelled out with spaces. Connect on LinkedIn, leave a like, comment, and share. Catch you next week. This has been Season 2, Episode 41 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me.
He's gonna have to fight! Bang! Pressure's coming! Dumped! Hogtied! When you've given everything, what will the record books say about you?